Now.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for having me. I've been really looking forward to being a part of this meeting and speaking to all of you for a number of months now. I know it's been put off for a while, but thank you for the introduction. My name is Rooj. I am a first-year undergrad at the University of Toronto. And before I start this conversation and this discussion, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that although I'm not in Winnipeg, I am in Toronto right now, and I'm still on traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And that is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And it's important for me to take a moment to acknowledge that, as although I'm in a different city, no longer in Winnipeg, the land that I'm residing on is still First Nation land. And that is a moment that I need to take to address as I take this time to talk about my experiences outside of Canada and the things that I've been able to do since being here, and after being able to participate in the first meeting of state parties for the nuclear ban treaty. I will be sharing my screen to talk about my experiences, and I'll be showing you a presentation. I will just do that right now. Today, my presentation is titled The Present and Future of Activism. And I gave it this title because I really felt that after my participation in the nuclear ban treaty first meeting of state parties, I got a better sense of what direction I personally was headed in and how we as a movement and as a collective were coming together to work on this global issue. In my goal to be a further part of this, I wanted to find a way to attend the conference myself, which is where all of you came in such a great help. And I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have been able to go under your sponsorship. With you, I was able to attend as a youth, and there weren't a lot of youth present, but for this kind of conference, in the first time ever, there was a larger number than ever before. And that is because organizations and individuals were willing to help youth to come. In my time before attending, there was a lot of preparation I had to do. And a lot of that preparation came from listening to some of my close advisors, some of which are on this call right now. And I'm very happy to be seeing some of you, and also doing my research, which I'll be getting further into along this meeting, and how I've been able to produce some of this research to be available to other youth as well. So in my time of preparation, I was very anxious about attending this meeting, as I was aware it would be full of like diplomats and government officials. And I, as a fresh 18-year-old, had never been in that type of room before. And I was, honestly, the meeting took place right during my last couple of weeks of high school. So it was a very scary time for me, as I was stepping into new territory I had never been aware of before. Although I had been building up to this moment, and I had been working on this for a number of years and working alongside organizations and individuals that have been very passionate about this, I had never been present in a space where these big decisions were happening. And so to have been able to be there and listen to the conversations take place and hear how the diplomatic discussions were occurring was really moving for me, and it inspired me in a lot of ways that I'm really looking forward to talk about later as well. Some of the stages that I broke up this whole adventure into was the preparation stage, which was understanding, learning, and educating myself on the topics. I went into it having some degree of knowledge, but I knew that I would be amongst some of the leading professionals in this area. And so I wanted to feel confident in myself and what I knew. And that meant accessing certain toolkits and information that is actually accessible for other people through different organizations that I've been able to work with. The second step was connecting. While I was on the ground there, I found an opportunity to connect like I never had before, with people I had never even heard of their organizations or their groups, but in speaking to them, I found a lot of commonalities and similar goals. And that's something that I'm also very grateful for, because if it weren't to have been able to be there in person, that opportunity would not have made itself available. And in talking about connecting, it's going further into saying, how was I supported and how did I engage? And how can you and others also engage in these platforms as well, whether it be from Winnipeg or elsewhere? The third stage was the planning stage. After leaving Vienna, I found a lot of inspiration and motivation from within myself. And I really felt that I wanted to take some of my knowledge and awareness and apply it elsewhere, especially as I was in the process of preparing to go into undergrad. So there was a lot of change happening at that time. And then the final stage was executing, is what happens since. With all of that planning, what are some of the results? And how have I taken what I've learned, what I've experienced, and this once in a lifetime opportunity and turned it into something that I can take further and apply elsewhere in my life? Since my preparation and planning, I have found that there are many resources available. One of which is the RTT Toolkit, which is a resource available for any who want to learn more about nuclear weapons and their implications. And this toolkit was a huge use for me. Alongside other sources and support from RTT, I was able to really better understand the necessary information before I attended. As the introduction allowed, I was at the time an intern for Senator Mary Lou McPhedran. And Senator McPhedran was a phenomenal person to work with, I would say, in that I, through her, was able to get a grasp of how these discussions take place, because she is in that level of talking and she's in that level of discussion having on that grand scale. So through her as well, I was able to learn more and formulate my abilities to put together a constructive and cohesive letter to all of you, and also use my knowledge to prepare myself best to go to Vienna, as the whole journey was very daunting for me, but it was not something that I wasn't excited for. I was incredibly excited for it, and I knew that in attending, a lot of things would change for me. And I was correct in thinking that, because in attending, I was able to connect with some people I hadn't before, including members of Reverse the Trend that I've never met in person before, that now I feel closer to than ever, and other organizations like the Global Sunrise Project, in which I connected with Canadian filmmaker Kasia Slapner. And I'll be showing you a clip of one of Kasia's like short videos that she put together while we were on the ground in Vienna, that I was able to contribute to because I was present there, and some of the discussions that took place. A lot of these resources, like the RTT toolkit, have also been made available, and I, alongside RTT, have been able to construct it into a cohesive document, which I'll be able to give you a sneak peek of later on in this presentation, as that's one of the things that we've been able, that I've been able to create since the Vienna conference, because I was able to take some of my knowledge and apply it into, as I call it, a how-to manual. And it's meant to serve as a step-by-step guide for young people who want to start their own campaigns, such as the one that I co-led for the ICANN Cities Appeal in Winnipeg, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, that was successful. So in my time in Vienna, the Cities Appeal, some of the work I had done before, and also learning from other people, those were all discussions that took place. And I really saw that there was a lot of interest in some of that work, both locally in Winnipeg and how that can be applied globally. In my time in Vienna, I had several hats. I attended as a part of the ICANN youth media team, where I was in charge of some of their social media. I was a Manitoba youth liaison intern for Senator Mary Lou McPhedran, where I was also keeping tabs on lots of her media and taking notes. And I was also attending as a youth coordinator for Reverse the Trend Canada. All of which, this was all a lot of things to juggle, but they all fell into the realm of working with a format and medium that I was aware of and familiar with, such as social media and connecting with other youth. So I was really able to take all of that and grow my skills in marketing and media and getting it out there and knowing how to properly engage with people there, because every day there was a plethora of information that was made available to me, and the numerous conferences that I was able to attend had so much information at disposal that I needed to learn how to take that information and apply it elsewhere and put it out for everyone else to be able to access. At the time, I was an intern with my close friend, Avinash Paul Singh, whom I'm sure many of you may have heard of or worked with, but he is a phenomenal person. And at the time, he wasn't able to come with me to Vienna. He stayed here. But that didn't mean that his role wasn't just as impactful, because in his time here, he was watching everything live from Winnipeg and keeping close documentation of every discussion and all of the events that were occurring. So both Avinash and I created a really close-knit team, as well as with Sarah Rollator, who at the time was, I believe, she was a student research assistant for the senator. And the three of us were really able to, with the senator, we're able to come together and take that information we were learning, Avinash here in Winnipeg, or there in Winnipeg, me in Vienna, and Sarah also in Vienna. And we were able to every day take all this information, compile it into this cohesive analysis of what happened that day, and put it out for other people to witness on the senator's social media, on the senator's platforms. And this meant that there was a lot of interaction happening, because the senator's media was now being run by three youth that were on the ground, getting a perspective of what's going on. In speaking of youth, I also, in my time there, realized that although I was a youth there and there hadn't always been a lot of youth present for these conferences, I wasn't the only one. And there were a lot of others there as well, such as this Japanese student that was there. Her name was Haru Kanura. And she, as well as her friend, were brought there through their school. And they, alongside many others, were there to listen to the conversations. This is an area that many of us have not been exposed to before. Doing Model United Nations at school only takes you so far, but when you're actually there in person, in the place, it is truly an experience like no other. And because I was able to be there, I was able to connect with these youth and get their information and get their perspectives on what they thought of the whole issue. And there were some things, though, that didn't particularly work out. Because there weren't as many youth. There was an amount, but there wasn't as many as one would hope. There were times where being a youth didn't allow me to fully participate in everything, because there weren't protocols available to accommodate to young people, especially like 18-year-olds, because most of which were in their 20s. So there were at times things that weren't easily accessible for me, but it didn't necessarily mean that I wasn't able to still participate to a great degree, but it just meant that it opened that conversation of perhaps in the future more young people need to take place, because I noticed I wasn't the only one, and there was a lot of interest. And in me putting it on social media, talking about it, taking these detailed notes, I was also hearing back from youth in Winnipeg and people I went to school with that were asking me what it was I was doing and how they could be more involved. And that made me understand, okay, there are people out there who are interested, and there is a network that wants to be built. There is a group that wants to be formulated. But with something like this, especially with a topic like this, it is very multidimensional. It has many aspects to it that at times are hard to grasp for young people. And that means that education of the topic needs to be more easily available and made in words that are easily digestible as well. So I was able to take a lot of what I learned, which was done in a very speedy manner, and take it and put it out in social media and write it down, and all whilst being able to connect one-on-one with people. I was very fortunate while I was there to have been invited by ICANN to speak at one of their workshops, which was, the workshop was centered on ICANN Save My City. That was what it was called. And what it was trying to do was, I was paired up with two other people who also were hugely involved in the ICANN Cities appeal from their cities, and also in Mayors for Peace. So the three of us were able to lead this workshop and talk about what it was that cities can do on a ground level. Much of the other workshops took place, had speakers from around the world come and give testimonies on some of their firsthand experiences, which were very moving and touching and painful to listen to, as they've had to recount these stories countless of times. But then there were also workshops present through the events that happened around the TPNW conference that were meant to mobilize and encourage people further. These workshops didn't happen as a part of the TPNW, but they all took place as a part of the ICANN Nuclear Ban Forum, which took place a few days before the actual first meeting of state parties. ICANN held this forum, and it had over 600 people attend, over 40 speakers, going over 2 days. This forum is the one that I was able to participate in the workshop for, and this forum was a more casual setting where you could speak one-on-one with other organizations and young people from across the world who were attending. So in my experience with this forum and in listening to the events that took place, I was able to really get a sense for the first time since I've gotten involved in this work of how big all of this is and how many people really are involved. And I felt inspired, to say the least, and I don't feel that word even truly encompasses what I felt at that time, because I had never been in a space where so many people working towards the same thing were together in one place, discussing and talking and learning from one another. And because of that, I felt very prepared before the actual meeting of the state parties, which happened a few days later. Now, for the meeting, there was not a lot of one-on-one time, except for in between breaks where you could approach certain diplomats or officials and talk to them. But a lot of the meeting was also just being present and learning, which is something you can't do if you're not there in person and if you're not there listening firsthand to the discussions that are taking place. As much as prior research and experience can prepare you for it, being there in the same room as the people who are making the decisions, as the people who are deciding our government policies, who are dictating what goes on in our world, is really a moment to take in and say that change is possible, because if I can be in the same room as these other people, as the officials from countries that are parts of NATO as well, and countries that have signed on to the TPNW and countries that haven't, it's a moment to say, well, if I can be in the same room as these people, I feel that I can truly make an impact and maybe I can do something about it. And also raising discussions of why Canada wasn't present at the conference. So all of this build up to the meeting of the first state parties was really important, and attending the Nuclear Ban Forum and some of the prior research I had done was really preparing me for these one-on-one discussions I was going to have, and being able to be present at the same time as these people who are deciding and dictating what we can and can't do in our governments, because they do make the decisions. But the beauty in also being able to attend and having these events be open for civil society to partake in is that we can speak to them. This was a moment for me to really realize that a lot of the people making the decisions on the government level are people just like anyone else. And I think at the time, I had a very disconnected idea of how diplomacy worked and what it looked like on that ground scale. But being present there had really changed my perspective on everything, and actually really inspired me to redirect some of my own interests towards my studies in university, as well as I've now, because I was able to attend this conference, have found a passion in work regarding international relations and peace and conflict and justice studies. So in being a part of that, I was able to find a passion within myself and actually have a realistic idea of what these processes looked like, and understand that perhaps in the future, I want to see myself on that same scale. So I felt very inspired, I felt motivated, and at times I also felt very nervous because I had never done it before. But I learned quickly that many others, such as the picture you see here, this is some of the team from Reverse the Trend. We were all new to it. And a lot of us maybe had been to a conference before, but most of us hadn't, and we were all young people. And Reverse the Trend wasn't the only group of young people that I associated with. There were many others from other organizations, such as Youth for the TPNW, who really just showed you how many people at what scale were coming together and saying, we want to be in these discussions, but we might not know how to, and this is new for all of us. So I truly found a lot of inspiration and passion through my attendance there, and was also able to partake in some really exciting projects. And here's some more pictures of my time there. First one is a picture taken during the workshop that I co-had with these other two individuals, Tuba and Home, who are from two totally different parts of the world. I believe Home is from Spain and Tuba is from Sweden. So they were coming together to talk about Mayors for Peace and the ICANN Cities Appeal and stuff that they were doing locally in their city, while I was talking about Winnipeg in Canada. So it really brings perspective to how interconnected all of this is, despite us being from such different parts of the world. And here's a picture of me with Senator Marilyn McPherson, where we raised the question of where is Canada? Because in all of these discussions, Canada did not send anyone officially to partake in the first meeting of state parties, which we were really hoping for and pushing for, as Canada's participation in this kind of discussion, just being present and would have made a big difference. But that isn't to say there isn't still action pushing for Canada to be involved further on, such as in the second meeting of state parties for the TPNW in November of this year, which will be held in New York. So these conversations took place, and I was really able to, for the first time, be really on the front lines, in the sense of I was one-on-one with these officials that I hadn't done before. Because prior to that, such as working with the ICANN Cities Appeal, it was done on a local familiar level, working with our city councilors, which were wonderful to communicate with, working with you members of Rotary and also other organizations that were able to endorse Avinash and I's campaign. It felt familiar and comfortable in a sense, because we knew that there was a backing, and we knew that the goal we were working for, which is to get Canada to sign onto the TPNW, was a strong goal that we really strived for. But at the same time, we hadn't truly gotten a grasp of the one-on-one. We hadn't gotten a sense of how big it was, which I fully came to understand once I was able to be present in Vienna. Because as I was sitting in that room with officials from dozens of countries, such as Germany and Mexico, and I could go on with the list, but as I was sitting in that room with them, people that have made incredibly impactful decisions within their own countries and on a global scale, I had a moment of really realizing that as much as I had understood that this goes far beyond me, and it goes far beyond any of us as individuals, but it is something that goes towards us as a collective, I truly came to understand that this is impactful, that things like being present, things like partaking in the ICANN Nuclear Ban Forum, which hadn't been done before, actually create impact. It raises discussion. It creates questions and conversation around people that prior to that might not have had interest in the discussions taking place. And I experienced that, and I heard others did too, where in us partaking in all of these people, hundreds of them, being mobilized together to talk and share discussions, share knowledge, and really create this diverse space, we really found that other people that weren't present started to raise the same questions of, this is a much greater movement than I had realized. And I heard that myself from a lot of people in my own inner circle and amongst my youth, was this is a far greater thing than I had realized before. Because it's so easy to get lost in the details, and since we're also dispersed across the world, it's so easy to feel disconnected. But when events like this take place and forums like this happen, you get a sense of we are greatly connected with one another. And this is actually a growing campaign. This is very big, and it is constantly expanding, which is a really empowering thing to be present for and to hear and to witness firsthand.
This new treaty categorically prohibits.
This is the video that I was able to partake in that was created by Kasia Slavner, as she put together a lot of the Canadians that were there. So this is all of us Canadians asking, where is Canada in this discussion? So I'll start it from the beginning.
This new treaty categorically prohibits the most violent weapon in the world.
Canada should be at the TPNW MSP because responsible states want to eliminate nuclear weapons.
This is the first feminist international law that we have on nuclear weapons.
So Canada, to uphold its reputation as
this new treaty?
And that was the video that I was able to partake in. And that video was only a snippet of a much greater discussion that was taking place, because as we all gathered together as Canadian youth, as Canadian officials like the senator herself and other professionals gathered, we really started raising the question of why isn't Canada present for this? Which is something that I had asked myself and others that I've worked with and that I've engaged in conversation with many times before, is why isn't Canada present? But when we were able to come together, we were able to create something like this video, which couldn't have happened if we weren't present in the same space at the same time. And this was only step one of a much greater initiative for more work to happen. After this conference, many of us dispersed and started our own projects and initiatives, because once we had spoken to each other one-on-one and gotten an understanding of what each of our goals were, we were able to say, these are my skills, here's how I can contribute, and likewise with the other person. For me, I was really passionate about creating a how-to manual to make it easier for other youth to partake in the ICANN Cities Appeal. And here's a sneak peek of the first page, as we just completed the manual as a project through RTT Canada, and it's come together really wonderfully. And right now we're on the final stage of finalizing it, which will be made public very soon. So this is like the first page of the manual, and this is something that I felt very inspired to create. This manual I had the idea of making and was inspired to make through others that have similarly been thought of. During my time as an intern for the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War Canada. While I was interning for them, I furthermore was really found like inspiration and passion on the topic of education, and that education is really lacking on this topic, and I wanted that to change myself, and I decided to get started on this. But it wasn't until attending the first meeting of state parties in Vienna and really getting a sense of everything happening on a ground level that I started to really put time into creating this manual, because I was further inspired. Any moment that I had where I was doubtful of my impact, doubtful of my abilities, and doubtful of the community I was in, was immediately demolished once I was present, because I got a sense that even a small participation, a question, saying, how can I do something, is impactful in and of itself. And talking to other people is impactful, because when we raise questions, when we raise discussion, it furthers education and knowledge. And the more people are educated and knowledgeable of a topic, the less afraid of it they are. And the more they can feel empowered to take action themselves, which is where I believe a lot of inaction is rooted in, is lack of knowledge, lack of awareness of how can we actually make sustainable change. So I was able to get started on this, which I'm really excited to have just finished, and it's now in that final stage. And in that also, in my time in Vienna, and like not even to mention how beautiful Vienna is and how gorgeous Austria is, I was really able to take myself out of the comfortable bubble that I created for myself within Winnipeg and put myself in a place that was completely foreign to me. And it inspired me to create this, to pursue my further studies in university on a topic that related to international relations. And now I'm currently in the process of working towards hopefully establishing a campus club here, which will kind of take a similar scope of connecting like-minded individuals on the topic of nuclear disarmament and nuclear weapons and their implications. So all these discussions are now taking place because I've come to learn and educate myself much farther than I could have ever imagined. This time last year, I was in a completely different place. And since that, I have grown tremendously. And I have grown in a way that I wouldn't have anticipated before and truly didn't expect for it to happen to this scale. Until I was able to partake in my time in Vienna and speak to people. And all of it was possible because I was so greatly supported by Rotary Club. And I think without that support, I really couldn't have been able to create some of this outwards effect. And I wouldn't have been able to participate in these much greater initiatives that go beyond me and go beyond any of us as individuals. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. And it's a time in my life that I'll always look back on very fondly, as I believe the first moment that I truly found myself rooted in a cause that I was very passionate about, and truly felt confident that if I can be there and do something that was meaningful, do something that I could see the inspiration within other people, then I feel hopeful. And when we're having these kinds of discussions on a topic that is so detrimental to human well-being and in many ways global well-being, it is very easy to feel disconnected and feel discouraged. But it is moments like this when we're able to really come together on this scale. And it really was a great scale, that it is very clear that there's so much happening that we might not be aware of. And there's so much happening on so many levels across the world, projects and initiatives and campaigns that we've never even heard about, but they're all working together for a greater cause. And I think that was really impactful and powerful for me to understand. And walking away from it, I got a sense of how diplomacy worked. I broadened my communication with individuals I had never been made aware of before. But after meeting with them and hearing about the work they did, I made one-on-one contact and started to discuss on how we could help each other, whether they were across the world or in Canada or even from my own city. I came to understand my own capabilities in knowing that I have many resources made available to me. And part of the I Can How To document puts some of those resources together. So in the time that I spent doing research and putting together all of this info, I want to make it easier so that somebody with just like a click of a button can have all of it ready right there in front of them, rather than having to go through a lot of that process that I had to go through, and a lot of other young people did too. And honestly, not even young people, if we take that away for a moment, anyone really that is new to this and that isn't aware has to go through a long process, because if you type in nuclear weapons or anything of the sort into Google, you will get hundreds of searches, and it's so easy to be overwhelmed and not know which direction to go in. So that's something where I felt inspired and saying, I want to be able to partake in expanding education, making it easier for others to participate in this as well. And that's kind of one of the ways that I felt that I could participate better. And I really learned a lot that otherwise I don't believe I could have understood to that extent and to that level if I weren't able to be there myself and connect on the ground level to others. And I'm really excited to see where else that takes me and where else that takes others as well that I've been fortunate enough to meet and communicate with. And I'm really grateful to have been able to attend and have this opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to speaking to all of you further as well as I share the how-to document and the progress that's going to be made in the next year. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much for having me and listening to me discuss my own experiences.
And thank you so much for making